Hello, everyone, and welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Automate Onboarding and Offboarding to Boost Operational Efficiency. This session will be a discussion with our experts from BetterCloud, who will discuss at a high-level overview of how to boost operational efficiency and to understand the where and the what to automate within your organization to be successful in today's environment. This meeting is being recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to view this later this week. We ask that you stay on mute because there is a sizable audience for today's content. With that being said, this event is being hosted by Worsta. Our mission is to help organizations maximize their use of the cloud. We work side by side to help our clients make good technology decisions and grow their business in ways they wouldn't have the ability to do so otherwise. This helps organizations develop cultures of continuous innovation powered by real-time collaboration. With all that collaboration, however, organizations have a lot to worry about when it comes to improving IT operations and automation. BetterCloud provides a solution to assist with streamlining IT operations, automate tasks, and assist in eliminating SaaS management. So I'm handing it off to the BetterCloud team for a deeper dive into our topic for today.
Andrew, thank you so much for that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Dennis Clark. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at BetterCloud. Joining me today is Justin. Justin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Justin Hayes, Enterprise Solutions Engineer here at BetterCloud. I get the pleasure and the joy after Dennis goes through this deck of walking you through our actual platform. So look forward to doing just that.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Yeah, so today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the surveys that we've done and some information that we've gathered that hopefully will resonate with you around things that are challenging IT today. Then we're going to talk about how BetterCloud helps IT with respect to automation, a sweet demo from Justin. And then we'll wrap it up with some discussion on the value and the ROI that not only you get out of BetterCloud, but what you should expect to get from SaaS Management Platform with regards to SaaS management. And we'll leave some time at the end for some Q&A to answer some questions you might have along the way. So with that, let's just jump right in. So we all know what's been going on the last few years, right? We got the pandemic, we got economy, wars, rumors of wars. It's all kinds of things going on in the world. And the tough part is IT is already lean, right? IT's always been sort of doing more with less. So there's already challenges with IT. But then you have things like economy is great, there's funding, so there's hyper growth. So now IT is hiring and processing and provisioning a lot of new employees, and that's on top of just keeping the lights on and already projects that are in play, like digital transformation projects that are ongoing or maybe accelerated because of post-pandemic and trying to move to the cloud. Then there's a shift in the economy, and now we're right-sizing organizations, or in some cases downsizing, and there's contraction. So there's departing employees that you have to process and do so securely. And then in the middle of all that, there could be a merger, there could be an acquisition. That creates a whole host of new challenges for IT. And so we polled, and this slide is a tale of two surveys. So last year we polled both customers and non-customers, about 740 folks, and asked them across three key pillars: scalability, productivity, and efficiency. And we asked them, like, what are your specific challenges, like day to day, what's going on? And then this year we polled customers that have been using BetterCloud for a while and asked them to be very succinct about how they're using BetterCloud and the value they're getting out of BetterCloud, to try to sort of highlight where they're seeing the value and how that value is impacting the organization. And so right here, again, tale of two surveys on efficiency. One of the data points we had was 92% say they spend too much time on repetitive manual tasks. And this has been pretty consistent feedback. We have some, in fact, we're going to have one poll today, so I'll let you know when that poll comes up. But we, in many webinars, we ask the same in some of the questions, and it's pretty consistent. There's just too much manual tasks and too much time on these repetitive manual tasks. But where we want to help IT get to is a point where you're eliminating those manual tasks. And in this example, on average, customers are saving about 1,700 hours a year, automating, right? And we'll get into those details. On the productivity side, and this is both productivity for IT as well as for end users, for employees of the company that IT supports. And an example here is, over 9 hours that end users are waiting on average to get access to a SaaS app. They may submit a request, and then that request may have to go through some approvals. There's some other hoops to jump through. There's a person on the IT side that has to then go, log into that admin console, if it's, Salesforce or Zoom or whatever, and then provision the user, set them up with the right, group and access and attributes and things like that. And that takes time. And then you have to, be able to do that at scale, right? And so that, that bogs down the whole process. And so the alternative is, we polled customers this year, and quite a few of them say that, the biggest benefit to the organization is, increased productivity across the board. So, again, we're trying to, figure out where the pain points are and then find ways to help solve those pain points. And then with scalability, which to me is probably the crux of all of this, right? One example of scalability is about a third, and this was last year, right? So about a third were either buying or getting bought by another organization. And again, economy is strong, money is cheap, and so we saw a lot of M&A activity, and that's disruptive for an IT organization on either side, right? Because you're now having to sort of absorb. Maybe they're a Microsoft 365 shop, you're a Google shop, so you have to like merge those environments, and now you have they're using different kinds of project management applications than you're using, and there's redundancy. So there's all sorts of work that's tied to that. And then on the flip side, we have almost 3/4 agree that BetterCloud improves IT's ability to scale. And this is critical because, again, IT is already a lean shop. There's still an ongoing staffing shortage for IT talent. I think IT managers, directors will tell us it's even a challenge to retain that talent and to train and give them opportunities to grow their careers, things like that. So eliminating manual tedious tasks has sort of a ripple effect, right? Because one, it frees up time, which we see here, but it also enables teams and team members to work on more strategic projects, more interesting projects, perhaps. And most importantly, it allows IT to absorb these changes in the business, where you're moving from hyper growth to contraction to M&A, digital transformation, all these things that come and go, and IT has to absorb those activities, right? So we'll get into that here. So why automate, right? And perhaps I've already answered that question, right? Because automation really is sort of the starting point of eliminating a lot of this manual task, labor, ticket backlog, all these things, right? And but it's not a new problem, right? Like my first job in tech was an IT admin, way back. And you know, I've spent time with like PowerShell and some, you know, scripting tools to try to, you know, figure out how to automate certain things, you know, that I'm doing over and over again, right? And you know, sometimes you have to get very creative, you know, in the solutions you're trying to solve for. But again, this is really where BetterCloud shines, and where we really spent. I mean, we've been doing this for 11 years now, and essentially pioneered the SaaS management space. And but it really does come down to, you know, sort of not just automating, but can I do it, you know, quickly and easily, so that I can, you know, scale it, right? So, but I want to ask you guys on the call, what challenges are you looking to solve? So hopefully, if this works well, then you'll see a pop-up for a poll question. If you could take some time to provide some answers to the poll, provide an answer to the poll, it would be great. And then I don't know. And Andrew, you'll have to let me know, like, you know, when you think everybody's answered the poll, and
For sure.
whether or not we get to see the results of that poll or not. Because I have a feeling that just again, based on, you know, we ask this question all the time, and the answers are, you know, pretty consistent. And I'm sure there's some out there who would be like, yeah, I'm gonna check every box, right? Because like,
Yeah.
all of these are a thing, right?
Yeah. So right now we are having the most votes for we're spending too much time on manual repetitive tasks.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be kind of the trend, right? It's just they're not hard tasks. They're not difficult, but they're time consuming, and more importantly, you introduce risk, right? Anytime you have that many steps that often, you know, customers have told us sometimes they're using spreadsheets to track this, or, you know, other documentation or systems in place, right? And you know, you miss you know, particular entry or a setting or something, especially on an offboarding or deprovisioning where you have a newly departed employee. You can actually introduce considerable risk to the company, right? So so really, it's like, how do we sort of get out from under that, right? And I did want to share with you, again, you know, we asked this question in January, and then we asked it again in April, in a couple of webinars that we ran at BetterCloud. And you'll see pretty consistently that it's just a manual task and manual labor, right? SaaS, you know, SaaS is complex. You know, late last year, one of our surveys, we found that the average company is using about 130 SaaS apps, depending on the size of the company. And that's been growing at double digits since the beginning of SaaS, right? We do see it slowing this year, right? Because a lot of folks are looking to consolidate and sort of, you know, right size their investments there. But it's still a huge number of applications that have to be managed in that environment, right? So what is BetterCloud, right? BetterCloud is the market-leading SaaS management platform, and we help automate onboarding, offboarding, mid-life cycle changes, you know, provisioning, deprovisioning, SaaS application access and entitlements, and we also automate security policies all across a multi-SaaS environment. Specifically on the use case side, you know, sort of where we, you know, our bread and butter is in, you know, user lifecycle management, right? This is really about, well, actually, it's really about automation, right? But within automation, right, we're talking about onboarding, offboarding, movers and changers, right? You get, you know, role changes, things like that, and also risky app discovery, detection, and remediation, right? And then for day-to-day operations, this is really around things like password resets, MFA changes, things like that, and trying to get IT to a place where you can actually start to democratize IT, where you can have like self-service IT for things like app requests, app access requests, things like that. And then, SaaS data protection, right? And this is something that's very unique to BetterCloud in that we have the ability to scan SaaS data and look for files that have sensitive information and flag those, and then we can also track if that data is being shared externally or publicly, unwanted sharing of that information, so that you can tighten those controls up, and so you can use automation to create policies to protect from essentially insider threat or data leakage. And also, benefit to compliance, right? Because we have audit trails that like never expire, very detailed, so you can go in at any time and you have that entire process documented, and all those tasks are documented from end to end, across the entire SaaS environment. So drilling down into user lifecycle management a bit, right? We talked about onboarding or provisioning. There's a few things that are going on here, right? So this is not just about provisioning applications. This is also about devices. This is about configuring groups and teams and assigning licenses, and this is also about least privilege access and ensuring that the right folks have the right apps with the right level of access, right? That you're not having too many super admins out in the environment and whatnot. And it also is typically driven by somebody outside of IT, right? Like recruiting, hiring, where they're onboarding folks, and Justin will walk you through sort of the the workflows and things like that you can see the automations in play. Midlife cycle, again, we got folks that are being promoted, role changes, group changes, things like that, and then offboarding. And this isn't, again, it's not just about deprovisioning applications. It's also about what happens to that data and those files that newly departed employee had access to. Where do they go? Who has access to those? What happens to their calendar? What happens to their device? And then, is there a way to like reclaim those licenses, right? So there's a lot going on, a lot of things to consider. And just to give you an idea of sort of what this looks like, right? And you'll hear the term zero touch, right? And so really zero touch is it's almost like nirvana for IT, right? In terms of automation, so that the automation is so good that IT doesn't actually have to do anything, right? Like it just happens. And so example of this is like today with new hire onboarding, right? The candidate gets hired, HR notifies IT, then there's, you have to, route that request for manager approval. So there's some, wait time in there. IT is going to open up a ticket, and then you have to go in and like provision, their ID and your identity of provider, your source of truth, and then all the applications, right? And so there's a couple things going on here. First of all that stuff on the right, there's a lot of it, right? I mean, it's like however many applications that person needs, sort of their birthright applications on day one, right? Or in many cases, it's not day one, it's going to be week one, right? Because you have to provision all of those apps, and it's dependent on, like, if they're in sales, they get certain apps. If they're marketing, they get other apps. So a lot of time, a lot of minutia, a lot of detail. In a zero touch environment, again, the candidate gets hired, and then the HR system or ITSM, there's a ticket that's created. BetterCloud can listen for that ticket from that application, and when it hears, oh, I have a new hire, it kicks off the workflow. So IT is not necessarily involved, right? IT is notified, right? So you can set up in the automation like, hey, send me a Slack or send me an email or something like that, right? But the whole process is kicked off and automated. And all of those applications are configured with the right level of access, the right groups, the right birthright apps for the right person. And really, this is about ensuring that employees are productive on day one. Since we know, based on this earlier surveys, right, productivity is a huge deal, right? And so, this is kind of like, sort of the flow chart look. But hopefully I've teed it up for Justin, who's going to actually show you the product and show you some cool stuff along the way. Justin, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I'm excited. I'm about to show you guys the best SaaS management platform in the game. I know that's an extremely biased position to take, being that I work for the company, but I do feel that way. I'm going to go through that onboarding use case that Dennis just showed you at the end of that. I'm going to also do something around mid-life cycle and app request, reset, tickets oriented in that nature, a user access review, and then offboarding as well. And I always want to preface this as, because of our time constraints here, you're only going to see a small bit of what our platform has to offer, right? These use cases largely live within user access management, but ultimately we do a ton of work around file and application security and management as well from a SaaS perspective. And if anything you see today interests you in whatever way or something that kind of prompts you to go into a different direction, I urge you to head on over to the website, check out our product further, or again, reach out to your Worcester rep and get on the horn with myself or somebody from my team, and we can walk you through the whole darn thing. Let me share over my screen, and if someone, Dennis, maybe you could give me a holler when we're good. I think it looks good, but all right, everybody good? Okay. All right, onboarding. There's two core problems from an IT perspective. Dennis really covered them at depth, but let's kind of just preface it really quick here. It's that it's an inefficient process. We see onboarding take 1.5 hours from an IT perspective, but what the real hit is that 1.5 hours often gets spread out over days or weeks. And so the actual individual, the actual end user doesn't get provision, doesn't get access to the tools they need until those days or weeks end. And that becomes a deep loss in productivity over that time span, those days and weeks that person could have had access to these tools and could have actively been working. And so this opening automation here is how we're solving for that, how we're eliminating those challenges. Automation works very simply in BetterCloud. You see me clicking across this library here inside the workflows section of our product. It's when, if, then. When a given event occurs inside of one of your SaaS applications, if these conditions are met, then carry out a sequence, all of these different action steps. And so let's take this from the perspective of your HR team. Let's say they have just hired somebody and they have set that individual to active inside of the HRIS tooling. In this case, we're using Workday. We'll use this as the kickoff point. And then let's say we built this workflow for a person in sales. The individual was hired from sales and they're going to get access to specific tools across the environment. Opening piece here. Maybe we're going out and we're actually starting the tracking process by crafting a ticket inside of your ITSM. Okay? In this instance, this would be ServiceNow. Again, picture this as Jira, Freshdesk, anything that you might use internally. And now, here's where I find the magic happens, right? Is that we have all that data from Workday, everything that's been entered from an HR perspective. And we're using that to crack a user inside of your Google environment or whatever your primary collab seat would end up being here. We're grabbing that first name, their last name, their work email, their department, their manager, etc. And we're crafting out that Google user using everything that we had from an HR perspective, completely hands off from an IT perspective. And now we're just taking in steps 3, 4, 5, 6 basic provisioning actions across Google, adding them to any groups that they would need, adding them to any shared drives or resources they would need from a files perspective, assigning them a given license if it was elevated to a certain degree, maybe setting their calendar time zone, just anything that we can to get their Google environment in the right space for them to kick off their work or their employment with the company. And now we're doing that same process, right? That same process across Slack. Again, we have this data ingested from Workday, also Google now at this point in time, and we can craft a Slack user as well, do these baseline actions of adding them to their channels or groups, etc. And now let's say this is a sales rep, right? And so they're going to need access to Salesforce, but maybe internally, you like a manager to sign off. This is an expensive tool, or there's obviously a good deal of data that you wouldn't want exposed to anyone. So you want managers to actually speak to this, or somebody else in the org. And step 11 here, this is a BetterCloud specific action where we're actually going out and grabbing approval from that person's manager to begin provisioning them inside of Salesforce. That person gets that email, they click approve, and bang, here we are now provisioning across Salesforce. In steps 15 and 16, we're commenting on that ServiceNow ticket, and then we're actually resolving it in full. And so what do we land in? We land in a position where that typical 1.5 hour time frame is now eliminated. Right? This is completely hands-off outside of that manager approval from anyone touching this. And so error rate goes away, and then efficiency, as far as the 1.5 hours saved, goes up. And then the real kicker here is that this person, this inside sales rep, they now have access to the tooling on day one, right? They can begin work on day one rather than waiting this days or weeks window time frame. That is onboarding. Let's skip over to a mid-life cycle access request. So I never think of these things like password resets and app requests and group changes. They aren't like heavy lifts. They're like 10 to 15 minute tasks from an IT perspective. But in most orgs, the volume at which they come in, it starts to add up over time. So if you get, 50 of these 10 to 15 minute tasks over the course of a month, right, that does become hours. And then here again, we are with this IT time suck. But now, more importantly, just like an offboarding perspective, or just like an onboarding perspective, is what the real issue here is that when there is an app request, despite it taking 10 to 15 minutes from an IT perspective, usually that individual still has to wait. There's a turnaround time that ends up being in this 1, 2, 3 hours. And so they go without this access that they need for that time frame. Again, a hit to their productivity. And so let me walk you through really quickly how we are solving for this particular use case. In this instance, the user just goes out to the ticketing system, right? Whatever different portal you have facing to them, and they make this application request. In this instance, we're saying, hey, they're looking for a Zoom license. Opening piece, our platform is going to go out to that ticket, grab all the details that are housed within it. And then what we're going to do is we could even layer an approval step if someone had to sign off on this. But let's just say we do give access to Zoom with no different approval pieces. So I craft this user in step 2. I update that user in step 3, send them a Slack notification, let them know that they have access to this tooling. Finally, comment on the incident and resolve it again. So what do we land with here is that now this is a zero-touch process for IT. Anytime a request comes in for an application, you set this up across your different platform or different apps. This is a turnaround time of instantaneous, no time from an IT perspective, and no turnaround time on a user access request. Now, let's jump into third use case here of access reviews, and these are kind of handled a little bit different. And so you can see that I now am in a different area of the platform. I call this, or this is called the alerts grid. And what this allows us to do is kind of set up different alerts or things that we want to house in BetterCloud that kind of go out and pull different user events. In this particular case, we have set up an alert of inactivity from a 30, as far as Zoom inactivity is concerned. So why would you ultimately want to go do about this? How many times do you see somebody have access to an app or request access to an app, and then like maybe they thought they were going to use it, but ultimately they didn't, or it just didn't become of a high utility in their role, and so they don't use it, but you're paying for that license. And now, is that user going to reach out and probably proactively say, deprovision me in this app? No. So it puts IT in this position where it probably behooves them to do regular access reviews, particularly of these core apps that have high cost points. Those take time, hours across your entire SaaS stack. And in turn, again, IT efficiency hit, but also spend hit. The likelihood of you getting these apps deprovisioned and getting that spend back is low. Also, security risk. That person has over provisioned privileges that they ultimately don't need. Here, we're solving for that. We set this Zoom alert up, and we say when a Zoom user hasn't logged in for 30 days, this value could be whatever you want, 60, 90, however you feel comfortable internally setting it. Set it to trigger every time it ultimately occurs, and then we're going to drop that into the platform. We click publish, and now this thing runs on autopilot, literally telling us every time a user hasn't been active in Zoom for 30 days. All of these different alerts we set up. So if you set this up for all of your different SaaS portfolio, they can serve as a win condition, as we talked about earlier, inside of the workflows or the automation piece of BetterCloud. When a user is inactive for 30 days, now, instead of anybody from IT having to go out and remediate against this manually or handle this in a review scenario, we can automate it. We'll go ahead and create a ticket just for tracking purposes. And then we'll go out here in step 2. Maybe we're reaching out to the user themselves or their manager, and we're saying, hey, do you need access to Zoom? You haven't used it in 30 days. No big deal if you do. And if you don't, we sure would like to deprovision it. So that person selects accordingly on what they would want to ultimately have. If they agree they don't need it anymore, well, then in step 3, we automatically deactivate this user, we close out that incident, and we're good to go. End result is, again, IT is doing no more user access reviews. They're eliminated. No time suck on that front. We also are reducing overall spend because licenses are being reclaimed in an automatic fashion and reducing our overall risk of exposure from a data perspective of somebody having over provisioned or over access to different tooling. Final one, and I consider this the most critical piece of the puzzle oftentimes for IT orgs, and that is offboarding. Why? Because offboarding is the biggest time suck. On average, we see our customers are spending 2.5, 3 hours on this process. So IT time-oriented problems. But again, perhaps the bigger burden here is that because of the intensiveness of this process, mistakes are ultimately made. And so people don't get deprovisioned from tools properly. This is, again, a spend risk, right? It's like all of these licenses that don't get reclaimed, they cost the company money. It's also a very, very heavy risk burden, as now a person who isn't employed at the company is retaining access to different tooling. And this is the flow that I've kind of showed here that was eliminate and solve for that. Again, we're taking this from the perspective of HR, right? It's like putting us into the zero touch position from an IT org, saying whenever we see that that person gets set as inactive inside of Workday or your HR tooling, and we're going to carry out these actions. Again, these would be specific steps for the sales rep in this position. Opening piece here, we're going to go ahead and create an incident for tracking purposes inside of the ticketing system. Now we're going to jump out to your mobile device management tool, whether that's GAN, whether that's Microsoft MDM, anything across the board, VMware, etc. We're going to lock their device down so they instantly don't have access to that actual tooling. And then basic deprovisioning steps across the entire Google environment. We're setting their password, deleting two-step verification codes, deleting passwords, blocking the mobile device for the user inside of there. We're rearranging all of their email settings, IMAP, POP, their forwarding, setting their auto reply, maybe delegating their inbox to a different person internally that would now speak on their behalf. We are transferring assets, and Dennis mentioned this in his presentation, a very important piece of the puzzle. It's like somebody owns groups, if they have different calendars that they speak for, if they have files that are critical to the org, these need to be handed off in a hopefully automated fashion, because manually is a bit of a pain on this front. And so that's what we're doing here. In this instance, we're transferring all of them to their manager, but this is easily be a security group, another person of their team. You could specify whoever you would want in this scenario. Finally, we're just removing them from their calendar access groups and hiding them in the user directory. This deprovisioning then continues across the rest of the SaaS stack that this individual would have. We're going to deactivate them inside of or disable them inside of Slack, maybe send over some integration logs to the security team. We're going to transfer all the accounts that that individual was speaking for inside of Salesforce and maybe had actively been working, and then freeze out that user. And now, at 23 and 24, you see a couple of other BetterCloud specific steps, and we've got our wait for duration. We rarely, if ever, see customers that want to actually blow away, delete accounts, or do anything from this perspective without some sort of hold period to be certain that you are actually ready to take those, what would be pretty intense action steps. So we're going to wait for 30 days. Could be 60 days, could be 90 days. And then we're going to use this approval layer again to get whatever individual or group of individuals would need to sign off on the final deprovisioning of this person. Once that person does, after that 30-day window, then we're doing these delete actions across their different SaaS stack and finally closing out the ticket. In result, we now have offboarding that was 2.5 hours, 3 hours, probably went across a number of different parties. That's going to be knocked down to almost zero. Two, the error rate that was typically occurring within this process, which we find goes up with each additional task you do to a degree, to a percentage. That's eliminated. And now we have complete reduction in risk of actual exposure from over provisioned or continued provisioning after employment. And again, spend, right? It's like no one's going to be dropping $50, $60, $70 on a Salesforce license or, again, a Google license, anything of this accord. And that is, that's offboarding. So those are the 4 core use cases. Again, I want to make it really importantly known here, those are just a tiny subset of what we can do. I also, because of time constraints, simply glossed over them. Sometimes I'll spend an hour on a call with someone talking about offboarding. So if these things piqued your interest at all, please reach out. Let's talk further. And with that, sorry, Dennis, I maybe went a little over on time, but I will kick it back to you and we can wrap this thing up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. Yeah, I went over a little bit too, so I think we're all good here. So let me get back up to where we were. Let's see if everybody sees what I'm seeing, which is great. One thing I did want to mention too, Justin was basically in the workflow engine. It's where all the magic happens. We do have templates, about 30 or so templates, so that folks can get up and running pretty quickly, right? And it's literally like step 1, step 2, step 3, pretty straightforward for things like offboarding, onboarding, maybe even more granular tasks, like you just need to change some file settings or change some permissions, things like that. So there's lots of templates in there. In fact, I think in our latest impact report, which we just published, on average, customers are up and running and deployed in 6 weeks or less. And so we really know, like, especially today's day and age, we want to make sure that tools that you're investing in that are getting ROI within 1 or 2 quarters, right? And so we know that's important. So I did want to go into, I want to show you guys an example. So, not just sort of, from BetterCloud's perspective, but from one of our customers and sort of the success that they've had and some of the results that they've seen that are a little more tangible. Seismic, if you don't know who Seismic is, they do, content management and learning systems. And they had a pretty lean IT team already. They had, quite a few things that were going on. And you can see here that, and Justin alluded to this, right? 750 automated steps, or steps that they were able to automate, right? That's significant. That is quite a bit of work. We have deep analytics on every aspect of the platform. And in fact, we produce quarterly assessments, right, where we can look at every aspect of, like, how many workflows and which workflows are working and how many steps and how much time is saved, so that we can report back, not only so that you can see the value of the platform, but also we're looking for gaps. We're looking for ways for you to, maximize your investment to get the most out of the platform that you can, right? And 860 hours a year, right? If I do back of the napkin math, that's creeping up on half a head count, right? So that becomes pretty significant for folks when when you have tight budgets and tight spending controls. So I think this is the final slide, right? And I wanted to make sure that I covered some things that differentiate us from the competition, right? And from other solutions that may be out there, right? For one, we're purpose built for IT, right? We've been doing this again for over 10 years. trying to help IT to solve these challenges that we've talked about. You saw in the workflow engine that Justin was demonstrating. It's no code, right? You don't have to be a developer or have developer skills. This allows you to scale the use of this tool across entire IT team. We also have an API so that if you do want to code, love to code, then you can go in and create your own integrations. We have like 70 plus integrations with leading applications, about 1,200 unique actions and alerts that you can automate across those, and then the API, to extend that even further. Again, we have templates. One of the things that Justin mentioned is, and it's very unique to BetterCloud, is we ingest all of that metadata that's associated with each application. The benefit of that is we don't have to continually pull each application to say, oh, is that user there? No, okay, then create the user. Now, tell me if the user's been created. Okay, fine, right? There's a lot of back and forth. It makes automation complex. We don't need to do any of that, right? Because we already have that data, so we already know, so we don't have to ask or prompt or do any of that stuff. And of course, world-class support deployed by leading companies across multiple verticals. And again, we have some concrete numbers, right? And these are just on average for a year, right? Thousands of steps that we're automating, and hundreds, if not thousands, of hours saved. Again, we're continually trying to help IT to get over the hump of that automation with automation, and drive real value for our customers. So with that, I wanted to open up for some Q&A. If we have any questions, Andrew, if you see any, I don't know where to go, but
I will monitor the chat. So yeah, if you have a question, just feel free to raise your hand, or just you can put it in the chat as well, and we can definitely answer those questions.
Yeah, one of the questions that we always get is more around the security side. Justin alluded to this in terms of automation, right? And I spoke to it a little bit earlier, but with respect to security, we have the ability to scan content. So you might think of that as data loss prevention, DLP. But we had the ability to scan and look for personally identifiable information. We can scan for credit cards, things like that. So if you're trying to maintain like HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance, we can help in those areas, right? By scanning, identifying those files, and then ensuring that those files don't get shared out, right, inappropriately. And so you can set up alerts, and I think you saw a piece of that from Justin. You can set up alerts to track if any of those files get shared or if anything like that happens. Then you can also set up automation to remediate, or to basically change file permissions. You can create an automation that says, hey, I'm gonna change the permission on this file. I'm going to alert the owner or alert the owner's manager. So you can basically completely automate that. So you're getting closer and closer to like self-healing around security, data security for your organization.
Nice. Looks like we have a question, Dennis, from Tyree. He says, "Looks like an amazing tool to implement. However, do we need a certain tier of software like Slack Enterprise or Google Enterprise in order to use BetterCloud?"
I believe the answer is no. Justin, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah. So right. The answer is really we are an API oriented tool, and so whatever degree of access that is given based on your license within that tool, we do have limitations around that. So for example, Slack only gives you certain user actions at certain tiers within their licensing from an API perspective. And so, no, you don't have to have any certain tier, but it could limit certain things based on what their API exposure is at that license level. I know that's, again, there's a bit of a technical question. I can also answer this at any level of depth further, Tyree, or yeah, feel free to expand out if you want.
Awesome, thank you. And Justin, I have a question for you, something that that's come up. It comes up quite often. A lot of times, IT techs will have to have, you know, admin or super admin access to every application in order to like go in and modify and adjust. Right? Is that a requirement that everybody has to be like super admin in order to work on this?
No, so that is kind of the beauty of what we do as far as centralizing SaaS management is you can actually granularize any of the administrative privileges inside of our platform. Obviously, we didn't go through that in the demonstration, but you could have different roles based on the tiers of your team. If you had tier 1 techs that were going to touch certain applications or do certain actions inside of BetterCloud, that would be a role all the way up to a super administration or higher level tier with deeper level access. And again, so get as granular as you like. Sorry, Dennis, sorry, you had a follow-up. Let me go ahead and tackle that. Do you have a list of tiers somewhere so I can take a look at what tier I need to be on? So think of this as Slack is going to have a list of tiers, Tyree, or Google's going to have a list of tiers. And so to investigate this stuff, you would look at, hey, at Slack's enterprise level or at their business pro level, what type of API access? What are the API changes or limitations? And that's going to be the same limitations that we are held to, the ones that they impose from their perspective. And so each of these individual applications are ultimately going to have their documentation that would tell you the answers to those questions of what you get at different tiers. That said, if you do reach out to us and you actually get on a demo call, I have deep understandings. My team has deep understandings of a lot of these different tiers. We kind of know them intuitively and have them mapped out. And so we can have this conversation at depth and really give you a firm understanding of exactly here's what we can do at this level. Here's what we could do at this level, etc. Hope that better answers your question.
Great. Well, it looks like we are getting close to time. I don't know if there's any last questions. I don't know if there's any last questions or if anything else, any questions that anyone has.
I think Tyree said something more there, Andrew. Tyree, yeah, I think you might want to reach out to Andrew's team, Courtney's team. Like that's the path you want to go here, and then they will kind of put you in touch with us, and we will absolutely flesh this all out on a call.
Definitely, Tyree. We will be in touch after this, after the webinar. Okay, great. It looks like those are all the questions that we have. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Justin, for speaking on BetterCloud and giving us this deep dive, showing us the demos, and answering everyone's questions. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and we will be in touch shortly with the recording and then follow up after the webinar as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.